Welcome back to WorldCinemaQuest, the channel where we explore cinema from around the world and uncover the stories behind the biggest films, the biggest surprises, and sometimes the biggest mysteries shaping the future of the movie industry. In our previous videos, we talked about the biggest box office flops, and then we explored the most watched Netflix originals that quietly dominated streaming worldwide. Those videos looked at the past and the present of cinema. But today, we're looking at something even more interesting: the future of global box office records. For decades, Hollywood dominated international theaters. But over the last few years, something unusual has started happening. Films made outside Hollywood are no longer just regional hits. They're becoming global cinematic events. And two upcoming non-English films could potentially challenge the traditional box office giants in ways that the industry hasn't seen before. Both of these films come from very different cultures, very different storytelling traditions, and yet they share one thing in common: they're attempting something massive. Let's start with one of the most ambitious mythological projects ever attempted in Indian cinema: Ramayana, from India. This film is based on the ancient epic that has shaped storytelling, culture, and mythology across South and Southeast Asia for thousands of years. The story follows the legendary journey of Prince Rama, his exile from his kingdom, the abduction of Sita by the powerful king Ravana, and the eventual battle that determines the fate of entire kingdoms. But what makes this adaptation extraordinary is the scale of the production itself. The film is being made with a reported budget of around 4,000 crore rupees, which is roughly $500 million, making it the most expensive film ever produced in India. That level of investment alone places it in the same conversation as some of the largest Hollywood productions ever made. One fascinating fact about the source material is that the Ramayana is believed to be more than 2,000 years old, yet it continues to influence literature, theater, television, and cinema across many countries even today. Another strange and interesting detail is that there are over 300 known versions of the Ramayana story across Asia. Different cultures have adapted the epic in their own ways, meaning the story has evolved differently in places like Thailand, Indonesia, Cambodia, and Nepal. That makes this film particularly interesting, because every adaptation of the Ramayana ends up choosing which interpretation of the story to emphasize. Another unusual piece of trivia connected to the production is that the filmmakers are reportedly using extensive motion capture and advanced visual effects technology to bring mythological creatures, divine weapons, and massive battle sequences to life on screen. Creating these ancient mythological worlds in a believable cinematic way is one of the biggest technical challenges the film faces. But if the production succeeds, Ramayana could become one of the largest global mythological films ever made, potentially reaching audiences far beyond India. And that brings us to another film that proves something fascinating about global cinema. Sometimes the biggest cinematic spectacles come from unexpected places. From Japan, we have the continuation of one of the most legendary monsters in film history: Godzilla Minus Zero. The previous installment shocked audiences and critics around the world by delivering incredibly powerful visual effects and emotional storytelling, all while being produced with a surprisingly modest budget of around $15 million. In an era where many Hollywood blockbusters cost more than $200 million, that number almost sounds impossible. Yet the film managed to deliver destruction sequences, creature effects, and large-scale action that rivaled productions many times its size. The story takes place in post-war Japan, a country already struggling to rebuild after devastation. And then something even more terrifying appears: Godzilla. What made the film particularly powerful was that it didn't treat the monster simply as a spectacle. Instead, the creature symbolized fear, trauma, and survival, reflecting the emotional scars of a country trying to recover from war. One fascinating piece of trivia about the film's production is that many of the visual effects were created by a relatively small team of artists, compared to the hundreds or sometimes thousands of VFX artists used in major Hollywood productions. Another unusual fact is that the director of the film originally worked as a visual effects supervisor, which allowed him to carefully design destruction scenes in ways that maximized realism while keeping the budget under control. In fact, some analysts in the film industry have pointed to this movie as proof that creative filmmaking and strong storytelling can sometimes outperform massive budgets. The film even won major international recognition for its visual effects, something extremely rare for non-Hollywood productions. And that success has dramatically increased expectations for the next chapter of the story. If the upcoming continuation builds on the emotional storytelling and creative visual effects that made the previous film so powerful, Godzilla Minus Zero could easily become one of the biggest international monster films ever produced. What makes both of these movies fascinating is that they represent two completely different approaches to blockbuster filmmaking. One is an enormous mythological epic with a massive budget, drawing from one of the oldest stories in human history. The other is a monster film that proved innovation and creativity can compete with giant budgets. Yet both of them have the potential to become global cinematic events. And that raises a very interesting question for the future of the movie industry. Will audiences around the world embrace these international stories in the same way they've embraced Hollywood blockbusters for decades? Or are we entering a new era where global cinema truly becomes global? Let me know what you think in the comments. Which of these two films are you most excited about? The ancient epic Ramayana or the terrifying return of Godzilla Minus Zero? And if you enjoy exploring the future of cinema with WorldCinemaQuest, make sure to subscribe and check out our previous videos where we uncovered the biggest box office disasters and the streaming shows that quietly took over the world. Because in cinema, the most interesting stories are often the ones that nobody expects. And those are exactly the stories we explore here on WorldCinemaQuest.